I'd like to resume our meeting. My apologies for coming back a little late. We had a working lunch to address our closed session items. Council, if you could report out, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The Board of Supervisors met in closed session to discuss agenda items number 41 through 44 on today's regular agenda. The board met and conferred with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation on agenda item number 41. That was the initiation of litigation pursuant to subdivision D4 of section 54956.9 in 2 cases. At this time, the board took no reportable action in either case. In regards to agenda item number 42, the board met and conferred with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation and the significant exposure to litigation pursuant to subdivision D2, E2, and E3 of Government Code Section 54956.9 in 1 case. The facts and circumstances justifying the closed session were the receipt of a claim from Citadel Exploration, Inc., dated July 9th, 2015. At this time, the board took no reportable action. Agenda item number 43, the board met and conferred with legal counsel regarding existing litigation pursuant to subdivisions A and D1 of section 54956.9. The name of the case is the Sierra Club et al. Versus the County of San Benito et al., filed in the California Superior Court for the County of San Benito under cause number CU-15-00081. At this time, the board took no reportable action. Finally, in regards to agenda item number 44, the board met and conferred with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation and the significant exposure to litigation pursuant to section 54956.9 in 1 case. This closed session is authorized by 54956.9 D2 and E2. At this time, the board took no reportable action. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. We will start back to our regular agenda before we start with our public hearing on the general plan. We have 5 items that I'd like to complete before we do that. And so we'll start with item number 35, and hopefully we can move through this quickly for the interest of time.
I will take advantage of moving quickly.
Thank you.
So I wanted to go through and share with the board some thoughts that we've put together related to the Resource Management Agency. We have the next item on the agenda related to the appointment of director for that. But I want to talk about it in my year here with the county as we've been taking the work of the optimity study that was underway as I came on board and looking at the organization and the many things that we're tasked with in those departments of maybe some different organization of how it could fit together. And it's always good to start with goals. And so in public service, I think it's really important to always make sure that we're aligned around serving our customers rather than kind of the convenience of organizing for ourselves. And one of the things that in having multiple organizations working in similar areas is sometimes there's overlaps, but more importantly, there's also gaps in services. And from the customer, the citizen out in their driveway, that's really what they're looking at, is how do they get services done immediately for those pressing issues, as well as thinking long-term. What are the big things that you don't want to screw up on that will come back to bite you in 20 years? And then also really looking at the staff that we have in the organization. We are an extremely lean organization, and so part of it was thinking about where do we start kind of growing ourselves back as we were coming out of the recession, not just replicating what we had, but to kind of think of what we should be or could be. Related to that, I put this together, and it's, so there's a large version for the board, and there's copies that were in the back for the public. And rather than a traditional org chart, I really wanted to go through and think about some basic structure of how we could go through and actually run a resource management agency. I know the board members have had some concerns about, is this something that's really possible? Other agencies or counties are able to do that, and I think there's some real opportunities here of how we can do things maybe a little bit differently. And some of this we've already started with, and I'll talk about that as we go. But what you see there in the vertical columns, or what I'm calling service areas, and it's looking at things of what we do in delivering services. Public facilities, buildings like this, roads and grounds, clearly our road network, but of also our park grounds, and as we start building more residential, more parks in our communities. Community services, so this is kind of looking at a lot of pieces that were scattered throughout the multiple departments. Code enforcement, what we're doing in our parks, the outreach to CSAs, one that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, long-range planning, which really needs to have a home and is, I think, focused around what we do in our communities. This is a good place for that to be, the Planning Commission and code revisions. Development services, I think, belongs clustered together, as well as then looking at engineering services, capital planning and delivery. We have a lot of that going on. Clearly, we got to deal with paying the bills and keeping all the state folks happy in the administration, and then integrated waste. And that, what you see happening here on this chart is I've looked at who would own each one of those and then kind of the services. So I'll drill down on this here in a sec, but these are those outcomes. And I want to make sure that as an organization we're focused on what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And so this is where we came with that. And I've been talking with the staff about this and through the administration. Kind of seems to be a good clustering of those types of services or outcomes. So drilling down on that, so up at the top you see what that major service area is. So in this case I've highlighted community services and development services. Most of those have a staff lead. Some of them don't because we're a small organization. But like in the case of development services, I think that's something that a senior planner really should be able to go through and organize that and run herd over all the different departments and agencies of how we do development services and working for the planning official or Byron's position of being how we operate. Down underneath that, I've tried to identify.
We have a question before you continue. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Hey, Joe, sorry to interrupt you, but since you're there on the subject as far as like staff lead, how will that be determined? Will there be like a merit-based hiring process, or is there already like a senior a position now that would just move to that spot?
Today we have we had 2 vacant positions, the senior planners in the past budget. We, as a part of all the budget work, moved things around. We have a senior planner. We're recruiting for it right now. And so as with a lot of things, we've got a lot of pieces moving, working towards something like this. And so that would be the plan, is that they would come in and be responsible. That would be part of our hiring process, is to find someone who thinks big picture and problem solving, to work across a lot of different disciplines.
Thank you.
And so you can see underneath of like development services, there's a lot of things that happen in that. And part of what I think sometimes gets lost in the budget process is how we actually go deliver these services, what it really takes to do that. And so what I wanted to do was start building essentially vertical businesses that, like development services. This is the services we deliver. Next underneath it, you see these are the staff positions that are devoted to that. Down underneath that, lastly, you see how we pay for it. And that's at a gross level, so it just says development and fees. What are the next steps you see here listed is I think we need to then go one more step, which is to then start putting operational performance measures under that. What is it that success looks like? How will we know if we've achieved it? And more importantly, if we're not achieving, what are the things that we should be thinking about? Is it a resource problem? Do we don't have enough bodies? Is it, do we have the kind of the wrong mix of bodies? To be able to go and help as we go through the annual budget process, and more importantly, on an ongoing basis to adjust the organization. And so with the last one, you see budgeting by outcome and service. That is really what we should be aiming for as we go through and build our budget for next year, is how do we take the structure and actually peel back our budget that we do and kind of make sure that we're really accounting for each one of these service areas. Because right now, a lot of them kind of get lost, they get lumped into big things, and it makes it really hard from a service delivery standpoint to even know what your resources are. So there's a lot of kind of fighting that goes on that's counterproductive. The other thing that's going on with this, and when you go back to the big chart, is there's staff that are blended across the organization. I really wanted to make sure that we got out of, we didn't stay silo-driven, and I hate that term, but that planners don't just stay in planning functions, that engineers don't just stay in engineering functions. And so like development services, you'll see engineers and planners blended together, and I think really would be successful where you have somebody at top that you could have an engineer working for a planner or a planner working for an engineer, that it's okay, the world will not end with that happening. to go through and really make sure we're putting a best product focused on our customers together rather than focused on how we are organized in an HR world out of it. So that's part of that structure that's put together with this.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Joe, now that we have substance in place and it's an evolving department, is there any way, you're talking about, outcomes and measurement tools, is there any way where when someone submits an application that there's someone in the department that can be held responsible to ensure that that's being tracked, making sure that the next person on the checklist does his or her job and then moves it further? So it might be an associate planner, it might be a secretary, it might be someone, but at least there's a responsibility attached.
Right.
Then go
Absolutely, and that is part of the purpose of the senior planner position is their day-to-day focus is keeping projects moving through the process of knowing what's going on. They will be doing some projects, but I think it would be a failure if we really think of them as just being a full-time project processor. They need to be doing supervision and oversight. And that then also rolls back up to the planning official position or the lead of planning and development services. But having that ongoing kind of week-to-week what's going on with projects that's where that would rest in my mind. And then being able to look back at the performance measures is the other piece of it, is that if we have a target that says, our goal is to get a comment letter in 30 days, how often are we achieving that? And that's real, right now, because we don't have a permitting system, there's really no way to do that other than a hand calc every week to try and figure that out.
Yeah, because, Madam Chair, I get calls, and I've gone to you many times. I would prefer just call someone. It goes, hey, Tom, what's the process on this?
Well, and more importantly is that the customer actually would be able to know and see where they are in the process and help kind of see, are they ahead of the curve or behind the curve, and then being able to help resolve that themselves and go to the right person. That's really success in my mind, because if somebody has to call Byron all the time or call me or call you, we're really just adding time to the process and noise to the system versus making sure we got the right tools there. And that's where you go back to, do we have the right mix of staffing to go for the work that we're trying to get done? And is the dollars, the resources matched up to that? And that leads into ultimately things about, do we charge the right fees for permits? Is the right mix there that's going on? Are we focused on the right parts of our process? And, I think staff has done a good job of weeding stuff out of the process to kind of be focused. But, I think there are times when just the system overwhelms itself. And that's part of, having good management tools and systems with like the permitting system. That will help with that. We did go through the budget process this year. We created the RMA director position. We put a building official position in. The goal is bringing that in-house. We made the one building inspector we had that was part-time, full-time, so we've now got bandwidth there. We added the senior planner position, or kind of made that ongoing. Permit technicians, an analyst position in the integrated waste management. So we've been kind of reshaping the organization along this strategy. We did take out 3 department heads as a part of this. So part of the goal is to move resources down to the front line, being able to deliver those services. It's one that I think is still going to be fluid as we go through and kind of continue to kind of get settled in with that. And so, as a part of this is the world as we know it as of July 20th, and kind of where the resources are and where the workload is, and I think it will continue to adjust itself around. But I think it's a great starting point for Brent coming in to be able to go through and look at how to kind of hit the ground running with it, and we've already kind of talked our way through the structure with that. So I think the next piece of this is, what does it take to create the resource management agency? We already created the director's position. We did that back in March, and then we put it in the budget. The recruitment's underway, so that'll be the next item on the agenda. We have recruitment for 9 other positions going on right now within the department, that combined planning, building, public works, integrated waste department. A couple more that we're going to spin up on. The consideration of the board today. Really the next steps behind that are then starting to, if the board's interested in moving forward with this, is to actually start changing the county codes. All the references to the public works director, the planning director, county engineers, is to make sure all those are reconciled correctly together. So that's something in the August, September time frame, because we do have to publish those. We would look at continuing to realign our staff and work based on those outcomes and services, so kind of bringing administrative staff together so they're not scattered between 3 departments, continually kind of mixing stuff. We're doing some projects in development services right now, bringing back a project review committee and getting staff working together. We're trying to get all the public counters down to the first floor instead of split between 2 floors. So there's things that we're working on right now to make ourselves even operate virtually as a single department, just to start learning what that's like. Big things like getting the printers working between all the floors and shared directories. We need to go through and update the website clearly. I think the big one's going to be looking at the budget itself and is starting to think about, getting ourselves ready for next year and in building those performance targets. The contractual county staff balance is one that right now we have our contract with CSG for building support. I've been talking with the staff from CSG to keep them apprised of what we're up to. It's one that the building official is probably going to be a multi-month recruitment just to find good candidates with that, and then figure out what our relationship's going to be, because we still are going to need contractual staffing, but we kind of want to change the blend with that. And then the integration of development services is that other big piece that I think will have real payoffs. So that is the recommendation that I've put forward, and working with Ray and the rest of the county administration is, I think, where we should be heading to as a county. I think there's a lot of upsides. There's definitely going to be some things we'll kind of work our way through. But it's one I think that at the end of the day, the value is there. We're just too small of a county to try and run different organizations like that. But it is going to be challenged just to, as we go through and do that transition and some knowledge transfer. We saw that as we lost some key staff here in the last year, and just trying to bring people in to fill back in. I think that's going to be a continuing challenge. But I would say is one of the advantages of this is that we, for a long time, have been a lot of functions of one person functions. So when that person left, that institutional left, and whether that was when Lynette left out of CSA, whether when Adam left out of capital projects, or Mandy left out of integrated waste, those are all key people in our organization. And when every one of them left, we have suffered. And that's something that we really need to build resiliency into the organization. And so we can't afford to really have one person knowing it all, that we really need to share that around and spread it around. So that's the other strategy behind this. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Joe. Do we have any questions or comments?
Just,
Yes, Supervisor
yeah,
Turner.
one real quick comment, and this is very, very helpful for us and the public to decipher what is going on right now. And that the last comment that you made, I think, is one of the key issues that we have in this county, is that we don't have a deep staff, and when we do lose somebody that's focused on one set of jobs, it's really tough. And so how does this integrate that, really? Are we going to have an engineer that understands the planning, and he's to be the go-to guy for the planning department, and the engineers are kind of staying in the public works sector of it? Or how do you...
So actually, if you look at that where it says staffing, that kind of middle band, you'll see engineers under there for like a 1 FTE, or it says 0.5. The thought is that there are staff that are moving between those functions, really looking at where the demand is, and recognizing some of these it's a constant demand, but we need to go and kind of split ourselves, so that you will go through and potentially have an engineer who's working half-time in, or 2 of them may be working half-time in development services, or there may be one that's working there half-time or full-time, but maybe they work there a year or 2, and then we rotate them and kind of bring somebody else just to kind of keep knowledge going. That's the underlying strategy. Is in some ways it's like a virtual staffing underneath here, like a consulting business would run, that we're focused on content, and that there are knowledge people at the top where you see the program leads, that there's a certain amount of knowledge that's living there of technical expertise, and then down at the staff level where the doers are, is that we've got technical knowledge and kind of running both places. But I would say At the end of the day, the engineers are going to work for the county engineer for technical pieces. You know, the planners, wherever they live, would be working for the planning official for technical knowledge, but they may be out working in whether it's community services or development services, or it may be that they're working on integrated waste because there's a project that's going on and they are going to divert over there for a while. But they're always going to have technical responsibility back to their kind of home world, but they may live virtually and report and actually get evaluations or whatever, you know, partial evaluations done, kind of who their direct supervisor is, which may not be the same profession.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions before I invite the public? Supervisor De La Cruz? Or were you raising your hand, Supervisor Rivas? I'm sorry. Okay, Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Joe. I hope that, and you probably said it in different words, but I just want to make sure this is what I'm hearing, is that in the staff, that section of the staff, that if and when in the future it will happen, there's a vacancy up, that there's someone down there ready and able to take that position.
That's the goal, is that as you have vacancies in supervisory and management positions, we should be, as a strategy, you know, when we're hiring people to staffing level, you know, you hire a planner based on them being a senior planner.
Yeah.
Versus just being a really good planner.
Because, I mean, we might not have the best salary package, but we can at least commit that there will be, you know.
Opportunities.
Yeah, lateral, you know, opportunities available to them, absolutely.
No, the best candidate you can ever have for a job is somebody that you've developed in-house, because they understand your business and you understand how they operate.
Okay.
And you're going to have the highest likelihood, you know, of being able to track them into those spots versus trying to bring somebody else in. That said, is we need to be an organization that is very open to bringing kind of outside folks into this. But the reality is we are a job training organization for a lot of other communities around us. And so I think the more that we can go through and in some ways staff up at that staffing band, you kind of you build that pool, recognizing that you are going to lose folks to the outside, but you also are bringing people up through the organization that way too.
Thank you. Any other comments? I will make a few. First of all, this has been a long time coming. I think as a board, we've always talked about consolidating departments. You know, being such a small county, we should have done this, but, you know, it took that kind of study and participation, like from you, to be able to make the recommendation and know that we're doing this right. I see a lot of efficiency coming through this way, a succession plan that is critical that you just talked about, communication between departments that is going to be so much better long-term planning for the department as a whole, the county as a whole, shorter waiting periods, hopefully, for the applicants of any of these, you know, in any of these departments. We're going to improve public service as a whole, and the cross-training is going to be incredibly essential for us to be able to accomplish all of that. So I see a lot of that happening, so.
So if we ever get all our positions, everybody here, which hasn't been the case in the year I've been here,
Yeah.
I think you have really talented staff here.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting them to not be drowning with everything. So I think if we can get ourselves staffed up, they can do a lot and really deliver great service. It's just, you know, we've got to, you know, get all of them filled. And so that's the Georgia staff. And now that she's fully staffed up is helping with that too. So we're off and running.
Right. And in the interest of transparency, we have gone through a process that through the budget planning, these positions, we had an item on the agenda back in March. We have had a succession of planning steps that have gotten us here. Now we need the right person to be able to lead us in this. So, okay, well, thank you. I will entertain
Madam Chair?
comments from the, go ahead, CAO.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to this as well is with regards to the budget and finances, we shared up there staffing levels. And this last year, in 2014-15, we had a net county cost out of the three offices or the three departments of a little bit over $2 million. The net county cost for this year's budget is $1.98 million, so it's a little bit less. Again, our goal is our goal is to staff this properly and provide good customer service. I mean, it's ironic we're here for the general plan.
Right.
How long has it been? 13 years. It's been quite a while, and I think a big part of that is efficiencies internally. We definitely need to work on that. So this is a a step in that right direction to get the right staffing. So we'll probably be, looking at that. And also, too, this is kind of a template. We may be adjusting this with the new director coming on board. We should have this, and this is mainly what we're going to go with, but there may be some fine-tuning with this. Just want to let the board know.
All right.
Well, the last comment, I think,
Go ahead.
with today's item on the general plan, I think it is one of those really, really important things for the county to think about is, this department is the department that is charged with thinking about the future of the county and really helping make that happen. Clearly, it's a countywide, 55,000 residents involved in that, but this is this place where that lives. And I really wanted to make sure that, and sometimes long-range planning gets lost in development services, and you're only effective in having that conversation about the big where we're going based on the last water heater permit or whatever. And I think that's something to really be thoughtful about with this organization, so that the tough choices that need to get faced in the county, and as you make decisions about projects and kind of the direction, like the adoption of the plan, is that you've got that strong voice in being able to have that courageous conversation from time to time and not get lost in the noise of everything else. So I tried to preserve that in here, but that's one of the things I think that Ray's going to need to think about, the board's going to need to kind of always be thinking about, is making sure that doesn't get lost, because it's really going to be critical here.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joe, for that information. Great work. And thank the staff. Public comment on this item? There being none, I'll bring it back to the board for a decision.
Move per staff recommendation.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, item number 36, and that would be a CAO. Introduce that, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this item ties in with the previous item we had on our agenda. We have Georgia Cochran here. She's our interim HR director, and this is with regards to appointing Brent Barnes as our resource management agency director. We actually went through a process, an interview process. We started that process back in March, April timeframe, and what we would like to do is bring this before your board. This contract, we have Georgia here to kind of elaborate any further if you have any questions.
Okay. Georgia?
So let me just give you a very brief history. We opened this recruitment subsequent to your approval to move forward on March 31st. We opened a recruitment in April. We advertised pretty much across the U.S., not focused across the U.S., but also with CSAC, California State Association of Counties. We advertised through the League of Cities and a number of other professional sites. And received probably about 20 responses with cover letters, resumes, and information, narrowing down the folks who met the minimum qualifications. We probably had 8 to 10. We interviewed 4 who we felt highly qualified, that actually met the criteria we were looking for. And from that, it was a very clear choice that Mr. Brent Barnes was the most qualified, the best fit, and certainly by far the most experienced to try to lead this new agency. So we're here today requesting that you appoint Mr. Barnes at step D and authorize the CAO to execute this contract with Mr. Barnes.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. Any questions of Georgia at this time? Okay, open it up to the public for comments or questions. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for a decision.
I'll move per staff recommendation.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 37.
This item comes before us today from our Ag Department. We have Karen Overstreet here. She's going to be reviewing with you the 2014 annual crop report in San Benito County, and also requesting the authorization to release the report via the Agricultural Commissioner's website. Karen?
Good afternoon, Board. I'll make this short and try to keep the controversy to the subject to a minimum.
Thank
you. One of the mandates of the Agricultural Commissioner is to report on the status of agriculture of his or her county. And we do this in the form of our annual crop report. Basically, in general, the 2014 crop year was very similar to the 2013 crop year. There was a slight decrease overall of just over $2 million, and that was less than 1% of the overall value. The primary losses were weather-related. Mild weather and lack of chilling hours affected the cherries and the wine grapes, and the dryland farm hay grain crops were greatly affected by the drought. For an example of this, in 2014, 11,000 acres was planted, and we harvested 1,050 tons on that 11,000 acres, compared to the 12,900 acres planted in 2013 that produced 18,000 tons. These figures represent gross returns to the producers and does not take into account the costs associated with production, marketing, or transportation. The net income of the producer is not reflected in this report. I do want to take this opportunity to thank the farmers, ranchers, and businessmen that have provided this information to us. Without their cooperation, this report would not be possible. And I'd also like to thank my staff for collecting, compiling, and producing this report.
And Karen, we thank them as well, because we do know that I saw this online, you sent it to us, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of cooperation to get the numbers right, to get them together, and then compiling them, so thank you. And thank the staff for us, please.
Thank you. So what I'm seeking acceptance of the crop report and the authorization to release it via the Ag Commissioner's website page on the county website.
Right. And were there copies, well, the copies I know are online, but were there extra copies back there?
There were some extra copies here, and, awaiting your approval of it, then we will post it this afternoon online.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, I'll open it up to the public for comment. No comments, I will bring it back to the board for a decision.
I'll make a motion to accept the 2014 crop report and release the report via the Agricultural Commissioner's website.
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Karen, thank you for a fine job. All right, we've already discussed item number 38 earlier, so we're going to move to item number 39, CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this item is also coming out of our Public Works Office. Joe Hordell is here. This is with regards to your board accepting or approving the plans and specifications for the new main jail that we have that they've been working on. So we have Joe.
Thank you. So this is one of several items that will be required ultimately to move forward with construction of the main jail. We've been charging ahead. We've now received the State Fire Marshal's approval. We've had building permit approval for the jail. But we are still waiting on Department of Finance for lease documents. You may remember about a month and a half ago we came to the board with a series of documents for you to consider and approve. The first of those Ray has now signed, the construction agreement. And so what I'm bringing forward is the next piece of that puzzle, which is the construction documents, the authorization to release those for bid. I will note that it will be contingent on, we're still waiting for the Department of Finance for lease terms. That will probably be about another month. Originally, that was supposed to happen today. So we had found out late last week or early last week that we needed to create some legal descriptions that they had unfortunately sent to one of my former staff by email in March and didn't bother to send to anybody else. So we discovered that late, so I'm hiring an engineer right now to do that. So we are asking board approval for the documents. It's still our goal to be going out to bid in October, so we'll be back to the board probably in a September timeframe for the lease documents is my latest estimate. And with this, there are, for your frame of reference, the specifications are 1,600 pages, and the drawings are 300 pages. So it is quite a beast, but I did include in the package of what the building will look like, the basic concept of the site plan. In some ways, trying to keep security, I didn't go through and stick everything in there, but we are asking approval of the board to do this necessary step to release it.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any comments, questions of Joe? I'll open it up to the public for comments or questions. Okay, there being none, I'll bring it back for a board decision.
Move for staff recommendation.
Okay, there's a motion. I will second that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And the last item on our regular agenda is CAO, item number 40.
Yes, this is item 40. This is the creation or formation of the CFD for Santana Ranch. We have Joe here to discuss this. I want to first thank Joe and staff for all the work that they've done with this. This is something that's been good for our county, and appreciate all the work you're doing. Joe?
Yeah. Going back into the camp of really important things to kind of watch for, pay attention to, the board has set forward a really good direction for residential developments of revenue neutrality. One of the challenges with that was to figure out what that really meant. And so we've been off working with the developer and his fiscal consultant to kind of extrapolate from the development agreement that was done for Santana Ranch on what it really means to deliver services here in the county as a result of new residential development happening. We have spent a lot of months going back and forth, crunching numbers, scratching our heads, going, something doesn't quite fit. And so what we are bringing forward to you is the creation of our first community facilities district. This is a new thing for the county. Replaces CSAs, which have been problematic over the years. CFD allows us to go and create essentially an assessment district, pay for ongoing services and cost, that has indexing built into it, so we don't have to every 5 years go back out and kind of run a campaign, if you will. It acknowledges that there are increases in cost. It also has a little bit more flexibility in the things that we can fund through a CFD. The main structure with this, I think, is important to kind of lay out. We are looking at the normal costs that we would cover with the CSA, the in-tract like drainage, road maintenance, but we went really one step further, and we actually then built in the replacement cost for those infrastructure. So it's not just patching potholes, it was actually recognizing that my phone was going to ring. That we need to replace and pave roads in 10 to 15, 20-year time frames. That was another one in there. It'll go off. We also need on like the parks to go through and replace the irrigation systems, at some time frames. And so we should be putting money aside for that. And so we actually calculated that. We also recognize that there are county-wide costs that are incurred that increase because of new development, the increases to general government. And so we've quantified that. And then we also looked at the basic operating costs. And so we've built all of those into this number right now. For this project, the cost per year is $556. We've set a maximum amount of $600 as the levy that would apply to this subdivision, but then that would increase by the CPI for the San Francisco Bay Area. So it will index over time. We looked at some other ideas of like assessed valuation and things like that, but we thought coming back to CPI was cleaner, more easy to understand. But I think what's the other important thing out of this, when we did the original analysis at the development agreement, the original projections were that per unit, either this residential subdivision would have had a profit of $270 a year or a loss of $200 a year. In really going through and peeling back through that and working again with the consultant, I think it was very helpful in kind of answering those questions. That number went to 566, and that's, I think, a much truer approximation of the costs that we incur in delivering services to the residents as we approve the new development. So, I think it sets a good direction as we deal with other projects in the county to make sure that we're really understanding true cost and that we're building a mechanism that will, over the long term, really account for those costs. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Any questions, Supervisor Patella?
Yeah. I think this is absolutely fantastic, the direction that we're going in. We have to do this. We're already behind with governmental services, public safety, roads, everything. And we can't afford to go further behind with every house that we build in San Diego County. So we're headed on the right track on this. Do we have a mechanism or as far as reviewing this after so many years?
Right. So the reason we have the two numbers that I mentioned, the 566 or 556, that's the number that, as we calculate it today. We went through and then put a cap that said 600, because you don't want to kind of let it get, you know, a $20,000 a unit kind of thing. But we recognize that on a year-to-year basis, those costs may shift around a bit. For example, we're making projections on park maintenance on a park we haven't designed yet. We know the acreage, and so we looked at what are parks that are being maintained in other communities through CFDs for new development around the Bay Area to get some good numbers. And I have called around and talked to other agencies. So, you know, we've got pretty good confidence, but, you know, we don't know exactly our, you know, what the amenity package that's going to go in there. So we've left room in there so that, and I would say you shouldn't do it on a yearly basis, but it's probably every 5 years. That's one of the things that we should do with each of the CFDs, is to make sure, you know, that the cost numbers are still tracking correctly. And so we left some room for that in this process.
Yeah, great, because I think that's important. Maybe the governmental services don't quite equal out to the San Francisco Bay Area index, and eventually that cost is going higher than what the services cost.
Right.
You know, and our neutrality is the other way, or vice versa. So I think that's something we got to make sure we do every 5 years or at least periodically.
And within, let's say 5 years comes, we find out that it really 500, 600, whatever it is not enough money to be neutral, meet fiscal neutrality. What would be the process, Joe, to get that?
So that's why I say it's important to go through at this stage, to really go through and to ask the really good questions. Because if we discover that it's $2,000 in the future, really the only way that you go back and change it is you got to go through and have an election of all the property owners in there.
The 218 process.
Yeah, you are subject to those as you change the maximum rate. You can do that, but you got to go do the vote. So that's part of why to put some room in it and build indexing into it, is to make sure that you don't kind of overextend yourself that way. And so we've tried to be very conservative. And it's even the one example, and I realized in the packet I put the wrong report, so it got stuck in there twice from the consultant. There was a modified version that he sent, and what we did, and so this is kind of related to that point, there is, let me find it, Table 1, and the original calculation that was in Goodwin's report discounted the countywide cost for parks, for roads, and for drainage, because they said we were doing 100% of those costs in the subdivision. And I think, and sometimes that makes sense, but in this case, because that development really doesn't, it's not in the middle of the city that everybody would then drive through, so there's not other benefit to a countywide, is that there was kind of zero value to the rest of the county of those streets, but the residents of that subdivision depend on the rest of the county roadway network. Exactly. And so we said, okay, 50% of what the county spends on our overall number, that should also apply to the subdivision, because there is benefit from the rest of the county road network back in. So the same with parks, we did a 30% number, recognizing that that's park we put money into, but we are going to build a neighborhood park, so there's offloading some amount of that. But if you're going to play softball or soccer, you're going to be at Vets Park until we build something else. So we did build some of that in to make sure that the number really counted for those types of things that weren't, I think, picked up originally.
Yeah, I appreciate that you really looked long-term planning, and that's important, because that's where we have suffered in the past, where we really didn't plan for those things, and we should have. Yeah. So I appreciate that, looking out for the county and the taxpayers' dollars, so thank you. Okay, I will open it up. Oh, Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah, Joe, when you mention county, is that city and county, or
just the county?
Just the county?
And
I mean, because, you know, there are, I mean, the project is a burden to some of the city facilities.
Yeah, and that's
right.
what Joe was referring to.
Perfect.
Yeah, and that is, I don't want to dive into the rabbit hole of the tax sharing agreement, but that was part of.
That's a different discussion. Yeah, don't
Like
go
I
there.
said, so dealing with our side of the equation and what we know, but there are services like library and parks that are blurred.
Yeah.
And that is one that I think we've got to go through and kind of keep working at, of recognizing those are blurred services, and that between the agencies, we need to have financing that's blurred also to serve
Perfect.
those.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to the public. Any comments? Marty?
Marty Richmond from Hollister. Actually, this same subject came up last night at the city council meeting in another, on another property that is asking to be serviced by the city for sewer service, for waste service, which the city wants to do because they want to offset the cost of the wastewater plant. But the city is concerned, there are people on the council concerned that there was not what do you call it, CFD, is that the correct term? CFD, apparently, with this project. And so they feel eventually they're going to wind up annexing the project without a CFD. So first of all, in general, I do support this one because I support the concept. And if you're talking about $550 a year per unit, you're talking about $50 a month. And guess what? That's not a lot much more than a trash bill. And you're buying, you know, fire, you're buying police, and you're buying a lot for your money. In fact, I like it so much that any impact fees that could be changed over into long-range CFDs, we'd be much better off, in my opinion. And you know what? The home buyers would be much better off. Because if you're a home buyer and you're doing it on an impact fee basis, you're trying to look 30 years ahead, you've got to come up with all that money up front. And most of the people don't have that money up front. So what they wind up doing is tacking it on their mortgage, and they wind up paying interest on it. Whereas the more of it, that lower the fee, impact fees, and move it to a CFD, what you have is you have the CPI index, which you don't have with an impact fee, and you get to do adjustments. And you know what? If you do it at the beginning of the project, you only need one vote to pass it, the vote of the developer. Because basically that's the 218 process, one person or one group that represents the developer's corporation, whoever can sign off. So you don't need to go to 5,000 homes and start having that argument from block to block on that 218 process about who's going to say yes and who's going to say no. And we've been down that road, and that's terrible. So I encourage you to look in the long term, in addition to what I'm saying in the specifics, since it did come up in general. Just to comment on that, I encourage you to look at the long term, work with the city to make sure that any projects that get built in the county get a CFD that everybody's happy with. That if, in the event that the annexation happens, and I have to check the law to see how you could do that, that essentially the commitment to the CFD annexes over to the, so that may be another tax sharing agreement. I have no idea. I hate to say that, but I don't know what the law is. So I encourage that, and I support this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Any other comments from the public? Yeah, I'll bring it back to the board for a decision.
I'll move for approval of Resolution 2015-61.
Okay, there's a motion, I'll second. And is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And you know, you have to add to your motion to set a public hearing. Right. We can do that separate if you want to make another motion to set the public hearing for September 1st.
Yes, and I'll make a motion to set the public hearing for September 1st, funding day.
Okay, and I will second that motion. Any discussion on the public hearing? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are now at the end of our regular session, and we will start with our public hearing of our long-awaited general plan. So, yes, sir.
Information in the car. Can you give me a minute or two to get the information?
Why don't we take a 5-minute break so that he can do that and we can gather all our thoughts? So we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
2, 3.
So I don't have to go back? Does anybody have the page? 700 something, I know that. I didn't want to go all the way to the 793? Let me try that. That sounds right. Yes, yes. Yep, that's the one.
Testing. Ooh, it does work. I got it right. How about that? Testing.
We might. Am I?
It would be an appropriate song.
I will.
We're waiting for council. Matt?
You could do like a Tom T. Hall song.
We're waiting for county council, and we'll get started. And our, oh, there he is.
Never happened before.
And we actually have council in front of us, but we need our fearless leader here.
All right, let's go.
Thank you. Okay, welcome, everybody. I'd like to resume our regular meeting and start with our long-awaited, as I said earlier, item number 45, the general plan. So, Byron, you are on stage.
Right. Thank you. Now, the purpose of today's hearing today at the board is to review and consider adoption of the 2035 general plan and consider the certification of the EIR for that plan. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on July 1st, 2015 to receive input from the public and consider the general plan. Following the close of public hearing, the Planning Commission adopted Planning Commission Resolution 2015-04, which recommended that the board certify the environmental impact report and adopt the related CEQA findings and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and adopt the 2035 general plan with errata as modified by the Planning Commission. I'm going to be brief and turn it over to Michael in a second to give his presentation, and then you can get to the public and begin to your deliberations. But I wanted to briefly touch on the errata because I've gotten a few questions about that. The errata has been an ongoing list of changes since the board blessed the draft general plan back in May, I believe, or April or May of last year, prior to the EIR. So the errata consists of the mitigation measures from the EIR, some staff clarifications and responses to, and changes made as a result of responses to comments. It also includes what the Planning Commission changed at the Planning Commission meeting, which was to include a policy that required design review for commercial development and scenic corridors and encourage those uses to contribute to enhancing the scenic corridor. And then one of those commercial nodes within the 101 corridor has been shifted from the intersection of 101 to 156, which is the current location of the commercial site occupied by 101 livestock. So I wanted to clarify that. I've gotten a few questions on what those changes were. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Groves from EMC for his presentation. He's going to cover some of the history of this project and then hit, the main points of the general plan, and then you can get to the public and your deliberations.
Okay, thank you, Byron. Mike?
Thank you, Byron. My name is Michael Groves, president of EMC Planning Group, and I'm pleased to be here after about a year-and-a-half process to get you here. I have given you a handout of the PowerPoint presentation, and so you have it in front of you. There's a few more up on the table if people want to grab one. I don't know how many more there are, but there's a few more left if you want to share. So I'd like to first thank the staff for the participation that they've had throughout this process. They've been extremely supportive. Shirley Murphy, Matt Granger, and we also have special counsel who has been involved. Matt Henderson is here, he's in front of you, and also his associate Nadia Costa has been involved in the process. So I wanted to thank them for their participation and input, and they've done a great job in looking over my shoulder and making sure this is a really high-quality product for you to consider today. So the purpose is to consider the Planning Commission's recommendation on the general plan and on the other actions that you have before you today. Consider the input from the public today and other agencies that may be here that want to speak, and then consider adoption of the 2035 general plan before the board today. And these are the resolutions that I'd like you to take a look at to be considered today. Resolution is attachment number 1 in your binder. So every one of you, and let me just stop for a second and make sure everybody's clear. Everybody's got it a binder. And in that binder, I'll just go through it very quickly. At the first part of the binder that you've looked at, you've got your agenda item transmittal. Right behind that is a staff report. And behind that staff report is the resolution from the Planning Commission and the findings that the Planning Commission made. Thank you, Shirley, for including. Behind that is attachment 1, okay? And that attachment is going to be the first resolution you're going to consider, and that attachment 1 has to do with certification of the environmental impact report on the general plan and the findings of fact and statement of overriding consideration. Exhibit A to that is the San Benito County General Plan Final EIR. So the final EIR is in this binder that you have. The draft EIR is in the larger binder that you received, which is up front here, and I put it up front so you could see it. So those are the combination of those two documents, along with the findings and statement of overriding consideration, fall under that first resolution. Okay, so that's attachment 1. Attachment 2 is a resolution to actually adopt the general plan. That's the one you're going to be anxious to get to, I'm sure, or I hope you are. And the exhibit that goes along with that is the errata that, the general plan of May 6th that you endorsed, not adopted, but you endorsed that general plan of May 6th to move it forward for the environmental impact report process. So if you remember that May 6th meeting of 2014, you created this document as the project description to move the general plan process forward into the environmental report processing. After that exhibit is the second exhibit, which is the errata that Byron talked about. And that errata will be combined with that May 6th document. So when you approve this resolution, it will be the general plan plus the errata that will be combined as a part of that resolution. And the errata is simply that. It's everything from a typo correction that maybe one of you caught as a part of the process, or one of staff caught, as well as things that came out of the environmental impact report as mitigations. And then the last attachment, attachment 3, has an exhibit for the mitigation and monitoring and reporting program, and that resolution gets adopted separately with the exhibit being the mitigation monitoring program. So that just gives you a sense of what's in the binders to make sure everybody's clear about the format. And if you look at the screen, those three are the resolutions that you'll be looking at, and those are the attachments that go with those resolutions. Let's talk about the 2035 general plan. It replaces the 1992 general plan and contains 7 mandated elements: land use, circulation, open space, conservation, noise, and safety. And the 7th element is the housing element. If you remember, the housing element was adopted under separate cover in 2010, and it still stands and will stand after your adoption of the general plan, and is incorporated into the general plan by reference if you choose to adopt the 2035 general plan today. The 2035 general plan also contains 3 optional elements, and those elements are the economic development element, public facilities and services, and administration. This is the part you don't want to talk about, which is the history. Why is he going to go over history? Well, I just thought I'd remind you that you started the process in 2007, like you really want to be reminded of that, but you started in 2007, and I think the purpose of doing this is really for you and the public to remember that there was a lot of work that's gone into this, and you've had a lot of public process and a lot of input, including 2 EIRs and comments on 2 EIRs that you've gone through and responded to. So in 2007, the county started by identifying issues and did some stakeholder outreach. Then you did a community draft work program containing 5 goals that you had set out as a part of that program. And then the county hired a consultant team. In 2013, after that consultant team had done quite a bit of work, the county released the 2035 general plan and draft EIR on the general plan and received a lot of comments as a part of that process. The board took a time out at that point and said, we want to review these comments. We're not exactly pleased with the policy direction of the general plan, and we'd like to respond to these comments by re-looking at the general plan and doing some more assessment of it. That's when I came into the picture. It was 2014. Around February, we had a Board of Supervisors kickoff meeting, and we had the community involved. We got comments from both the board and the community, and you gave us some direction on certain things you wanted to see changed in the general plan, in policy direction in particular. And a lot of that had to do with responding to comments that you'd received during the process of the EIR going out for public review, the draft EIR, the 2013 release. March 19th, we had a joint Board of Supervisors Planning Commission meeting, and it was a workshop. It was a basically roll up your sleeves and go through the document section by section, page by page, to really look at the policies that you wanted to include in the general plan and not include, with the Planning Commission there to give their input as we went along. On May 6th, that was the date I reminded you about earlier, the board accepted the draft general plan and said, this is our project description for moving forward with the EIR. During the May-December timeframe, where the board had a little bit of frustration with the timeline expressed to me, and I totally understand that because things were behind schedule just because we had to re-look at the process. This timeframe was a critical timeframe, though, and we had to take the time we needed to get through the technical information, and we revised the draft EIR during that period of time, which included an AMBAG model release. AMBAG had updated their transportation model, and it was really important for us to look at that and understand that as a part of the inputs into the county for the traffic section. We also had never completed the county had never completed the water supply evaluation, so we took that on and completed that as a part of the process. We had a traffic peer review, air quality, climate change peer review. Those were 2 of the sections that the county board and staff had most concerns about as a part of the first round of the EIR. And then we revised the administrative draft general plan. In 2015, so that ended 2014. In 2015, county staff was put to the task of reviewing the work that we had done. And they did a great job of going through the documents and reviewing it, giving us comments on the administrative draft EIR. We were able to release that EIR in March of 2015. It went out from March 23rd to May 7th. We responded to comments on the EIR during the May-June timeframe. And then in June, we prepared and completed the staff report, resolutions, findings, et cetera, for the Planning Commission hearing. And the Planning Commission then held a public hearing on July 1st to take a look at the EIR, take a look at the general plan, and make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. There were 7 members of the public that spoke at the hearing at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did request a modification, as Byron indicated, to General Plan Policy LU 5.3. They asked for new commercial regional nodes to have a provision for design review and protection of scenic areas along the regional corridor, which is US Highway 101. We modified that policy, and you have that modification in your staff report. I also have a handout of it which is highlighted that shows the modification, if you'd like me to pass that out if you want to take a closer look at it. We also removed regional commercial node at the intersection of 101 and 156, and we were directed by the Planning Commission to include that in the general plan errata. So that's now part of the errata that would be looked at as a part of the general plan being adopted today. The Planning Commission recommendation was to adopt the resolution that was before them. That resolution was to recommend to the Board of Supervisors to certify the EIR, including Volume 1, and the final EIR, which is Volume 2, and the draft EIR, which is Volume 2, which is up in front of me, and adopt the findings and statement of overriding consideration. Part of that resolution was to recommend to the Board of Supervisors to adopt the 2035 general plan and the errata that went along with it, and adopt the mitigation and monitoring program. So over the course of the last 8 years, you've had numerous opportunities with the public, between yourselves, the Planning Commission, and the public to review the general plan direction, the policy, the environmental impact report, both drafts of the environmental impact report that came before you, as well as the final EIR. The next step for the Board of Supervisors is to hold a public hearing today and receive public comment. And then we would ask you to consider the resolutions I mentioned to you and the packet that I mentioned to you earlier in the binder, Resolution Attachment 1, Attachment 2, and Attachment 3, which will be the certification of the environmental impact report, the adoption of the 2035 general plan, and the adoption of the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. After that action is taken, and assuming it's a positive action for the county to move forward with the general plan, then staff will file a notice of determination of your action, and then staff will be charged with publishing the final document with the errata included into the document. So with that, I'm available for any questions, and would encourage the board to ask myself or Matt or Shirley or Matt Granger any questions that you might have, and Byron is here to answer any of the technical questions with me.
Okay, I have the first question, Michael. On the new commercial regional nodes, the policy LU-5.3 that the Planning Commission modified, can you tell me just briefly what the rationale was? I mean, is there a certain area that they were specifically inclined to protect? Was there any discussion of specifics, or was it just the entire 101 corridor in our county?
Well, I think two things prompted it. One is that we have a comment that came in from the public as a part of the process that was concerned about what a regional node meant. What was the definition of the node? How big was that? Could it sprawl along the freeway, or was there a definition of it? Our response to that comment was that we felt it was more of a zoning issue, and that we could deal with standards placed on those commercial nodes as a part of a zoning ordinance update, and that's the best place to put it, rather than in a general plan. And they made some good suggestions in their letter about what their view of it ought to be. Not that the county will accept that view, but I'm just saying they made some suggestions that were related to standards for those commercial nodes. So that was one. And that played off of also the concept that the Planning Commission really wanted to see the Highway 101 corridor protected as a scenic corridor. in some form or another, because they felt that there's a potential for a conflict between designating Highway 101 as a scenic corridor and having commercial nodes on Highway 101. So how do those interplay with each other? And again, I think that can be handled in zoning standards as a part of the process. So what we're saying is both are viable. You do have a scenic corridor, and you do have the potential for commercial nodes. So let's put some standards to those and make sure we understand how they will get developed in the future, or what kind of standards you'll have in front of you to enforce how they get developed in the future. So that was
One, I think Supervisor Botello has a comment in pertaining to that.
To kind of help clarify that, I had a constituent that has, a potential project in that corridor, and there was a concern about where does the scenic area begins and stops, and also, how we intend to go forward with approving a project within that area. And so my planning commissioner and myself had a meeting to discuss how we could address that. And I think we reached, an idea that is, solid, and that's where this came from. And, one of the things that we have reservations about is we don't want to look like Santa Clara County. It's a kind of a beautiful area, and I think we want to promote commercial development, economic growth in the area, but also it's important to maintain its scenic beauty as an entrance into our county. And one of the things that I commented at the the ribbon cutting at San Juan interchange was what a great job Caltrans did with a massive $91 million project and blended it into a rural character. And we just want to try to encourage future development, future commercial, to take that into account.
So it would go through review and design and review or whatever, but it doesn't eliminate, it doesn't completely disallow commercial.
No, and that wasn't our intentions. We did suggest maybe taking out one of the nodes at 156 and 101, but all the other areas remain intact, and we certainly want to encourage, some sort of progress.
Okay, because I just believe from the get-go that anything on the 101 is a potential for
right.
for economic, growth for the county and funds. So, okay, as long as I know that it was really intended for for just protecting the scenic.
Yeah, and we certainly did this with consultation with people that are along through there.
Okay, thank you. Michael, were you done with your explanation? Because that offers a little bit
No,
more.
I think that offers an excellent explanation, and that's where the Planning Commission came from, and they voted unanimously to recommend this to you as a board for adoption. And so we put it into the errata, and if you want to continue with it, there's nothing you need to do. If you don't want to continue with it, then we need to make changes.
Okay, and then the last thing on the errata for
Madam Chair.
from the planning, go ahead.
My question refers to...
To mine as
Yeah.
well? Okay, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that that's the intent, because at first when I was reading it, it's a potential for economic development for us to exclude 101 in San Bernardino County. I just felt that, I just can't support that position. But if it's not going to exclude it and it's going to, go and be potential, and then I do have a secondary concern is that if it goes to a district review process, I just want to make sure that we don't force gas stations to look like a mission or something like that, because then it just becomes a different issue now. And I want to make sure that this new district review process doesn't delay or discourage economic development in that 101.
Right, and I just would comment that conflict between having a scenic corridor and having a commercial node with development, I think through zoning standards you can create some standards that will allow you to define the two and what is meant by the two. There was also an added comment from the Planning Commission that you see in here that says, and also have commercial nodes help contribute towards the scenic corridor, meaning if there's a way to, if they have any land that they can set aside, or if there's a way to, landscape or contribute in a way that makes it, beautifies the scenic corridor, that's encouraged as well. And then the last piece is that they did recommend taking out one of the nodes, which was 156 and 101. And the reasoning behind that was that they felt like that was a major entryway to San Benito County on, Highway 156, and to, cluster it up with a bunch of commercial at that node, this is my interpretation of what they said, was not really what they wanted to do, that they wanted to keep it more rural and ag looking as they, as visitors entered San Benito, visitors and residents entered San Benito County.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Let me ask one specific question. I know we have to talk from a 64,000-foot concept. Byron, by moving forward with this new change that the Plan Commission has recommended, I've heard, and some people have called me, that we're talking about maybe if 101's here and a gas station or a store or something is being built, that there's got to be a buffer of, like 50 feet. Is that correct, that this?
There's not necessarily a buffer, there's standards within that corridor. And then we will further refine those standards and then require the design review to ensure that, while we're encouraging commercial development, that it still fits with the corridor.
Okay.
But there's not a specific buffer that prohibits anything between, we still allow development within the corridor, we still have.
I think Supervisor Patel brings good points. I just want to make sure that we don't, once that word called, we don't stop
Limit.
or encourage. We don't encourage. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
And it's not like we don't have anything there right now.
Right.
We have, what is it, a RV park
park, the
that did a
livestock
beautiful job. Yeah, and then the cattle auction
The
place.
livestock,
And those are good models to go by. We want little breaks. We just didn't want this, just concrete and, some sort of what you would see further up north. And if there's a field in between, or I think by the Red Barn, there's a beautiful opportunity to maintain the rural character, but also take advantage of that area as far as generating dollars for this county. So we didn't want to kill, we don't want to kill projects. We just want to make sure that it fits our, what we're trying to promote in San Benito County, an agro area and tourist historical area, and try to, at least in our entryways.
Yeah, I just, Madam Chair, because I just, I support Supervisor Patalo on the concept and the idea. I just want to make sure, Supervisor Patalo and I have been here the longest. I just want to make sure we don't approve tools that just stop economic opportunities. That's my main concern.
Okay. And, and then the one that you mentioned on the 101 and 156, Michael, you did offer us an explanation of why that was removed. And that is, there's a parking, like a park and ride on the right side, and then there's homes that maybe sit on land right on Merrill Road. And so are we talking that area or across on the east side of the highway, or all of it?
I think we're talking all of it.
Okay, so we're talking all of it. Okay. And there hasn't been any interest expressed in that area and I agree with you that is an entrance to the county. And if we want to maintain our rural culture, and that is a great entrance to showcase what San Benito County is all about. So that is removed in entirety then. Okay.
Right.
And there are also part of the rationale behind that was that there are commercial opportunities at San Juan Bautista, just inside from there. So
Okay.
we're not removing commercial opportunities from the county by removing that.
Okay.
It would be great if it was closer to the Monterey intersection. I always thought that would be a great commercial area, closer to San Juan.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for those explanations. So any other questions from Michael?
And Madam Chairman, what I handed out to you is actually just a part of the errata.
I see
So it's
that.
just an excerpt from the errata, so you can get right to it without having to spend a bunch of time trying to find it.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, I will open up the public hearing.
Mike, I got to ask you, you know, I read everything cover to cover and made lots of notes, but I'm not going to go in all those notes. But, you know, one of the things that kind of, in order for me to, you know, I would like to understand, two questions actually based on the transportation circulation, is one, and it's been mentioned a couple of times in the, you know, comments, is how did Shore Road Extension get in there? Because it's not in the RTP, and it's not anything that has been accepted anywhere. And I just don't see, you know, how we have that in our general plan.
Well, let me just first back up to say that when I first came on board, Shore Road was a part of your circulation element. And Shore Road was in the 2010 RTP. And it was a modification that was included in the 2010 RTP. It's not in the current RTP, is my understanding, although I didn't check that today, but that's my understanding. It's not in the current RTP, but it was in the 2010 RTP, and it was part of your circulation element when I came on board. I've never been given direction by this board or planning commission or staff to take it out. So when we went through the EIR process, it was part of the evaluation. And I also want to note that when we went back and did our research, we noticed in planning documents going back 20 years that the Shore Road extension has been considered a number of times in those documents. If you look at Caltrans documents and both plan and technical documents, the Shore Road component or extension to Highway 101 has been in those documents. So that's about 20 years worth of data that I've seen. And then repeating myself saying it was in the 2010 RTP, it was in the circulation diagram and document, and both in the general plan draft and the EIR that I received when I came on board, and we kind of broke things back down and re-looked at it. So I've never received any direction that was different than that for the Shore Road extension. And then when we went through the EIR process looked at it as an alternative, and I explained this somewhat on the record at the Planning Commission, and it's very well explained in the responses to comments. If you want to refer to responses to comments about Shore Road, but the essence of it is, to shorten it down, is that it's an alternative that goes across the board for any alternative that we would look at in the general plan. So if you had city center growth, you have new communities, you had expanded lot sizes, you had no project, Highway 25 is congested. And Highway 25 congestion, you only have control to your boundary. So you have control within the borders of San Benito County. So what we looked at is the technical studies, the Caltrans studies for Highway 25 and the 101 interchange to the north. And then there's the whole aspect of bringing in the 152 potential corridor. And in order to relieve congestion, it was determined that we needed an alternative, because it was not determined that the Highway 25 widening from the county line through Santa Clara County was in your control, therefore not a part of the project, essentially. We couldn't consider that as a part of the project.
See, that's where I don't necessarily, I don't agree that it's in the RTP. I've never, maybe I missed it after all these years myself, but let's move off of that. One of the reasons I bring this up is that, and why this is so significant, is that by identifying new roads, all we've done is raise cost to our impact fee structure on something that may not be the right alignment, because if you do have the 152 realignment, now we're having two roads going east and west across that region, and maybe that Shore Road, I know that Shore Road would not be the right alignment for a 152 alignment back to the 101. But we'll have parallel roads, and we're paying for that, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to have it.
So in the response, and I understand your comment, in the response to comments from Caltrans, and Caltrans made a comment, I think was comment number 7 in the EIR. The commenter believes mitigation measure TC1A.I.1 should require the widening of SR 25 and the extension of Shore Road if necessary. That's coming from Caltrans. They're saying you should do both. And rather than the widening of SR 25 or the extension of Shore Road. And so we wrote back as our response, according to the traffic analysis, only one or the other is required to maintain the existing level of service on SR 25 north of Shore Road. The mitigation measure is therefore not required to specify that both improvements are necessary. As noted in the draft, the revised draft EIR traffic analysis, the only widening of SR 25 that would alleviate congestion is widening SR 25 all the way to US 101. If you don't widen it all the way to US 101, you end up with a 4-lane roadway coming out of Hollister, and then when you get 0.6 miles past Shore Road, all of a sudden it narrows down to 2, and you've got the same congestion you've always had.
Yeah.
And as growth occurs over the, and this is what we have to look at as general plan consultants, as growth occurs until 2035, over the next 20 years, that growth is going to increase traffic on 25. So now your congestion is going to be, let's say, you know, it's going to be worse than it is today. Let's put it that way as growth occurs. So the point is that there needed to be an alternative in the EIR for us to evaluate. And if we have no control outside of the boundaries of the county, we have to have another alternative. So that alternative, and I didn't put the alternative in, it was in the documents, it was in the circulation element, it was in the previous EIR, and it's been carried through in this EIR as a mitigation measure. And the key point here is that it's an or. So it's either you've worked with Caltrans over time and improved Highway 25 to 4 lanes all the way to 101 over the life of the general plan, or you've come up with an alternative if that doesn't come to realization to do Shore Road. So it's not that you have to do both. That's our response and what we're putting on the record for the county.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Supervisor Munzer?
Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry,
if I
you
could
still
keep-
have the floor. I
Okay,
thought
yeah,
you were
thank
done.
you.
Because I would like to address the impact fee part component of Shore Road, because I was also concerned about Shore Road. And if I can ask our interim executive director of COG, Mary Gilbert, to come forward, she may be able to shed some light on that. Because COG is, as I stated this morning, we are going to be doing reassessment of our traffic impact fees. So, Mary, I believe I've been told that we do not have to include Shore Road into the impact fee study just because it's on the general plan. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, that
Yes.
clarifies then the Supervisor Patello's concern, that if it doesn't have to be included in the traffic impact fee study, then we're not obligated to collect impact fees for it.
All right.
So,
That's a concern, and I'm fine with that. I just want to make that clear, because, you know, we're trying to do something with Highway 25, and then we, you know, it's hard to keep adding more
adding
roads.
projects to it.
Adding projects, and, you know, when you have the, you know, Caltrans asking what's the necessity of, you know, the Shore Road extension, or how, you know, asking for information, you know, if it's been in our documents right along, they should have the answers. Heck, they ought to be driving it. But the other thing I wanted to...
Can I just acknowledge, Supervisor Patello, interrupt you just a sec, and just acknowledge, I really want to acknowledge what Mary said, that that's correct, and that the fee analysis and the fee study is an implementation step that is basically following the general plan. And it's an implementation decision that you as a board or the COG board or both will make as you move forward. So that's a decision point to be made as an implementation of the general plan.
Okay, yeah, and, you know, it's still concerning that we're put roads in and have no intentions of collecting the impact fees for. That, I don't know. Moving on to the second question I have, for clarification, because I was a little confused in reading the documents here. 101, the widening of 101 within the county has not been identified as being needed to achieve desired levels of service. So are we for the widening of 101 or against the widening of 101? And or are we just hoping that someone else pays for the 101?
The Planning Commission asked the same question, Supervisor, and thank you for asking the question. We did, in our response to comments, clarify that we are in favor of supporting the widening of 101. The reason it's put in that way is because the county does not need the widening of Highway 101 to support the traffic in San Benito County. So that widening is not needed. So again, it would be adding another burden to say, well, we're going to put that in as an improvement, and now we're going to have to figure out how we're going to improve, fund that improvement. It's one of those things that will come along when Caltrans is ready to come along with if you will, a constrained improvement. And there are some unconstrained identified improvements in San Benito County, meaning not funded improvements in San Benito County. But I think my point is that in order to do the EIR analysis correctly, we couldn't assume as a baseline that that would be improved at some point in the future.
And yeah, that's true. But going with the new communities, our core policy is to base those communities in transportation corridors that, and I'm not sure how you get through the environmental review if you're adding an impact into those particular corridors, and that's why we're putting the new communities there, and without acknowledging the need to provide some level of local funding for that major, transportation facility. How do we get, new communities to kind of pass the muster on the environmental review?
Well, just, I can't say off the record, but just in general terms, it's a stepwise process, right? You as a board have been working on a stepwise process towards how do we deal with 156 and allocate money to that? Now, how do we deal with Highway 25? How are we going to raise funding, local funding, so we can get some funding from federal or state? And then, eventually maybe that next step will be 101. But I think it's too far out for the scope and horizon of this general plan to be dealing with it. And Supervisor, just for your own notes, if you look at comment response 6.8, 6.9, and 6.10, and 6.11, all of those deal with the comment or the question you had with regard to Highway 101, and we've really tried to go in and address those, and we did make corrections in the EIR about the fact that, because it came across as if we didn't support 101, and that was inappropriate, or it was incorrect. It was not the intention we wanted to leave, so we wanted to make sure that everybody understood we did support the widening, but it wasn't part of the baseline for the EIR work.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we?
Madam Chair.
Okay, Supervisor De La Cruz and then Supervisor Rivas.
Madam Chair, I was wondering if I can make a request. The next time we discuss something about the general plan, can you, direct us on what page or what section? I just like to follow what the questions are, Madam Chair.
Okay. We'll ask Michael if they're referencing, or anybody else that's referencing the general plan, to let us know which page, so we can, and give us a little time to get there.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Rivas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael, since we're on the issue of transportation, I did have one question in my notes, and it's, I guess, just to get your opinion. One issue that I had was in the comment letter from, I think it was in two different comment letters. The first was from AMBAG. The one I'm referencing is from Caltrans. It's related to 620. It talks about AMBAG staff has accepted the use of the county's traffic forecast model for analysis. And in the comment, in response to the letter, it talks about how the AMBAG travel demand model has been problematic for our county, and it goes on. And I don't necessarily, I actually support the AMBAG, the travel demand model. So moving forward, if it's problematic for our county, how do we fix it?
Well, and again, it's important it's a good question, and it's important for me to clarify it. The AMBAG model has its limitations. It's a regional model. And so in being a regional model, and when you're looking at 3 counties, you'll have limitations in terms of how that model can serve you on a local basis. So the point about it, of it being a part of this process is that we used it for input into the county. So the AMBAG model was our primary source of traffic data for input into the county. But once that traffic comes into the county and it starts filtering onto local streets, the AMBAG model is not very efficient in terms of looking at how you're going to deal with intersections, new traffic signals, widenings, et cetera. So that's where the San Benito County model comes in as a helpful tool, and that's what we used it as a helpful tool to assess how we would look at those local streets. After you get off of 156 and 25 and you get into Hollister, and how does it affect those local streets? That's the best lay-term answer I can give you, and the response is here, as you can see, and we go through the response. It's not to say it's not useful, it's not adequate, all of those things. It only has a certain usability because of its size and its intention to be a regional model. And I don't know if, Joe, you maybe want to add anything to that, but it's basically, Joe and I have talked about it a little bit, and I think that it's an important thing to understand. It's a really good question you've asked, because we've had lots of people ask that same question.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
But I believe, in regards to your question, Michael, that it was okay to use the San Benito model for our general plan.
That's correct. I mean,
And I'm not sure, as I read through the letter from AMBAC, if it was them that said that it was okay, or if it was Caltrans, or somebody made reference to that, but I knew that we were going in the right direction by incorporating the San Benito model as well.
yeah, both AMBAG and Caltrans has made reference to the fact that it's okay to use the San Benito County model, either at a board hearing, in which I attended.
I remember that well.
Or in writing. And there's many jurisdictions in California that have their own models. I mean, you can go to a city of Monterey, you can go to San Jose, everybody goes in and looks at those streets at a really micro level. Whereas this is a macro view model that AMBAG has produced, and
It's regional.
It's regional, and without it, you don't have a starting place. So you have to have that as your baseline,
Yeah.
and then you tier down to get more refined information so that we know whether we're going to, put a traffic signal at the corner of X and X. Right.
And we use that as the starting model.
Right.
Okay. All right, Supervisor De La Cruz.
Michael, and I know we discussed this in the past. AMBAC's in the process of revising or coming in with the next plan. Once we approve the general plan, AMBAC, what numbers, or I guess what information is AMBAC going to use? They're going to use our general plan, right, to collect all the numbers from all the AMBAC area, and they're going to come out with new numbers and new regional roads. It doesn't matter if we decide to fix a Buena Vista Road or Wright Road. For them, they don't care that, right? They care more regional, 25, 156, 152.
Right. I've read to you state law before about this, and the guidance is pretty clear that the local COG is to use cities and counties' general plans as their, and other data that they provide as their direction. How that actually transpires between this board and the COG staff and the COG board is really something that I think this county really needs to continue to work forward to, and make sure everybody's on the same page. I think that's a critical component. There's been a lot of discussion, at these board meetings about that, the general plan, COG, AMBAG, the board are not on the same page. And I've said it over and over again, there's enough hurdles out there trying to get money and get through Caltrans and all the EIRs and stuff that it's really important that everybody work together and be on the same page to get the traffic improvements that are called out for in this general plan, because they're called out for a reason. In the general plan circulation element, they're called out because that's what supports the growth population that you've projected in the general plan.
Okay. Supervisor Munzer?
I think our AMBAG representative wanted to come up and kind of comment on it, so I want to give her the opportunity.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Very quickly, Heather Adamson, Planning Director for AMBAG. Just to answer the supervisor's question, we've already been in talks with Byron about once you guys do approve your general plan, we are raring to meet with you guys and see what you want us to include in our next growth forecast. I thought I'd give them a couple weeks break, so maybe you can go on vacation, but we were thinking in August and September, we definitely want to start meeting.
I just saw 4 weeks, so. can
4
you
weeks,
just
okay,
reset?
maybe after
Okay.
Labor Day. But this is definitely something that we wanted to do. We're starting very early in this process. We know that this process has been going on for a number of years here at the county. And so once you do have your new guiding document for planning, we will be taking that and incorporating it into our next growth forecast, which will be included in our next model update. And we'll also be using other data from the COG as well as the state's Department of Finance. Any data that we have as it relates to new growth forecasts, we will be incorporating.
And all I ask is that we are kept in the loop by all means. Our representatives on AMBAG, our people in the planning and.
Definitely. We have requested, our board has requested that when we meet with staff from the jurisdictions, that our board member reps are included, but we can also CC and include the entire board if that wishes.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, Michael. Well, first of all, I have to ask the board, are there any more questions before I open up the public hearing?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions, and the reasons I have no questions is because I want to say thanks staff, I want to thank Michael. I'm wondering if you knew in February of 2014 what you were going to go through for the next the next 18 months if you were taking on the task, but I want to thank you for it. My comment is, we could sit here and discuss the San Benito model, we could discuss the Shore Road extension till the cows came home. And fortunately, we did get the cows back into the EIR, so they can come home. So we have to go forward with this, I believe, but I had many little stickums on pages. I met with Byron yesterday for about an hour. I had met with him previously for an hour. I had met with Heather and Mara Toomey, our executive director of AMBAG. We had gone over questions about this, and I believe I met with you, Mary, about this. So I just thank everybody that took their time to explain this to me and resolve all my questions, and I got here today with basically all my questions answered. Am I 100% thrilled with this? No. But can I live with it? Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Supervisor Munzer, thank you so much for considering and thanking staff and those involved in this process. You know, when I started reading just the comment letters, it's mind-boggling. You know, everything down to the nets, you know what, is you have to respond to. And I know that that takes an enormous amount of time and knowledge to be able to make sure that our general plan is as it should be to protect the county. So thank you, thank everybody that was involved. I know it was a long, grueling process. So, yes, Supervisor Patel.
Gee, Supervisor Munzer, I was worried you were going to say you didn't have any questions because you didn't read it.
You can see all my little.
I see it. But I still do have a question, after the public comment period, I'll probably have a statement too. But one of the comments was from a property holder, owner in the Balsa community study area, and he made a point that I was curious about, because the community study areas are pretty broad and large areas, and I can't even think about that being completely built out. It might be a project in one of them, but how do they coordinate, say, adjacent properties? Is that something that's we could require by law, that the special new community would, because they are, a new community should have a mix of residential, commercial, employment, parks, open space, and community cores. And how do you do that in such a broad and multi-owned area?
Well, I think it's a good question, and remember, these new community study areas are a little bit of the term we use in baseball is a tweener, right? They're just a little bit in between because you as a board chose not to say these are designated boundaries and we're going to go study these boundaries in the environmental document to development level or even pre-development level, if you will. They are study areas that require you to amend the general plan, do a specific plan of some sort, and go through just what you're doing with Santana Ranch with a revenue neutral communities facility district, those types of things that you are now embarking on Santana Ranch, for example. So there's a long way to go with regard to those. So I call it a tweener because it all the way from the public input and the study committees, if you will, the general plan advisory committee, through to the planning commission and board, they said, well, we like the idea of new community study areas. Let's put them in. Let's give some general direction. And then I remember Supervisor Rivas saying, well, I want a little more. I want a little more understanding of what these are. So we put in some more existing information about those areas, a little more guidance, and then we have some policies in the plan, and those policies are on page 31 of the plan: new community location requirements, application content requirements, suitable new communities. It talks about what makes up a suitable new community infrastructure commitments, public service commitments, transportation commitments, and then conservation of land as a part of the new community. So we've given some guidance as what they can be, but we haven't designated. And if you remember the board saying, we want a little bit more, but we don't want to go as far as changing the land use designations. So the land use designations are all what they were before, whether it's ag or whatever. So you still have under your prerogative, and the way the EIR treats it under your prerogative, a subsequent plan effort, a subsequent environmental effort to look at new communities. And it could be all or a part of a new community. So it could be any part. And you've gone as far as to say, maybe the ones that we came up with today, 10 years from now, are not the ones we really want to see, and maybe they're in a different location. And you've gone as far as to say, we want that flexibility. So,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's part of my notes here, too.
Okay.
That's right. Okay.
Good. There is one error on two different sections of the agenda. Page 876 and 945 make reference to the county of San Juan Bautista and the county of Hollister. So just make sure. Was that intentional?
Can you give it to me one more time? It's what?
Yes, page 876 and page 945. It's the same, and I believe maybe one of them may have been the planning commission.
And what is it in?
I didn't go back, but I know that 945 is a county. We're going to be possibly adopting that, and so I want to make sure that that gets changed in the final product.
Okay.
Okay?
I got it.
Very good.
And then I just wanted to say last thing is Byron's not feeling too good. So the reason I was holding up 4 fingers for him is he really needs a week off. This thing is driving him under the bus. Okay, so
I got to him a message the other day because I'm always calling him about we have to meet, constituents that want to do this or do that. And I told him, don't call me until after Tuesday. So
yeah.
I'll give him more time.
And then to Supervisor Munzer's comment, no, I didn't know what I was getting into. Somebody said it was going to be easy.
Okay, at this time then, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing. So our public hearing is now open, and I invite, our clerk of the board, do you have speaker cards? I do not. You do not? Okay, then I will invite anybody out in the public to please come up and address the board if you so wish. You feel guilty about coming up, or
Oh,
what,
no, I
about
feel
what you're
guilty
going to
about,
say?
I feel, Marty Richmond from Hollister, I feel guilty about stalling this one more minute than it has to
Okay,
be.
Marty, it's 12 years in the makings.
That's right, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. So I don't want to look backwards on it, because it makes me a little nauseous. I want to look forward. Obviously, as your representative from AMBAG said, the minute you sign this or approve it or whatever, you're into it again, because we're 7 years, in the making, and 2035 is upon us before you know it. especially when you look at the thing. And I would hope that we can do some things different in the future, and I want to put them forward with the idea that maybe, just maybe, if someone mentions them, that it would be more palatable to think about it. I would really like the members of this board, as soon as they start moving into the new plan, to take off their political hats. You're going to get all the political input you need from the audience, people who have economic interests, or think they have economic interests, they have environmental interests, they want their interests put above other people's interests. You're going to get EIR, you're going to get all of that you need. But when it comes to the forecasting of what the population is going to be, or when it comes to the transportation plan, we need to stop using our political clout, and this goes for everybody on all sides of the table, to kind of try to get what we want in the plan. What we ought to do is look for realism. So my best example is the one I recently used, and so I believe the AMBAG representative is correct when it says we're going to get on it right away. I think that's a good sign, because my best example is, according to the AMBAG the last population thing, by now we should be halfway to having an additional 12,000 people in the county. Of course, it's 2015 already, and we're supposed to have 12,000 something more by 2020. And I checked with the state of California Finance, as she mentioned, and we have 603 more than we had 5 years ago. So we're supposed to have 6,000, and we got 600. In other words, this is a dynamic issue that changes daily. But when you look at a development, and you look at Santana Ranch as a perfect example, that doesn't change daily. That sometimes sits on the stove for 5 or 7 or 11 years. So if there's no development on the table, the idea that somebody's going to come in and build something in 3 years is preposterous. It takes 3 years just to get the ink dry on some kind of agreement, and then you have to do the EIR, and you have all the complaints. So I think we ought to look realistically at what the growth potential is here, so that we can realistically put it where it belongs to go, okay? Not say it's only X because that's what we would like to see. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Okay. Any other members of the public that would like to address the board? Christina?
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board, community members, neighbors. Christina Chavez-Wyatt, Executive Director of the San Benito County Business Council. And I'm very happy to be here today to thank you for the ability to review and comment your 2035 general plan. We commend the county for their leadership, continued leadership. It's been a large, long and arduous task. The work of staff, specifically Byron, fantastic. And an immaculate professional team that the work that Michael and his team have done in this plan has been really excellent. We commend the planning efforts and the environmental analysis, and we wrote to offer suggestions on ways to strengthen the environmental analysis while providing the county with the flexibility for future planning efforts. And it's very important, as this document is going to be leading us into making decisions into the future, that we look at the big picture and have the analysis and the rigor that's included in this document to do so. This document and its studies are planning and evaluation tools that we may use to plan in the future. They strike a balance between the need to sustain and protect important resources, which we support, with the need to permit the county to thrive, expand and enhance the community job base, improve the economic climate, support a superior quality of life, and actively contribute to the well-being of all of the communities of San Benito County. The time to address concerns on the particulars of our transportation and planning areas will come in the implementing ordinances over the upcoming years, population forecasting tools that are upcoming, and the desired private investment applications to be evaluated all on their individual merits with the study findings now that we have in the EIR. We're especially interested in the action plan for the economic development element, and encouraging further investment in our agricultural production and the winery and hospitality corridor plan. We can promote tourism here, which we're actively pursuing, but we need further investment in our transportation infrastructure, visitor services, hotel, food, beverage, and event venues to be able to highlight and support and celebrate the bounty and the beauty of our home. Thank you very much, and congratulations on your efforts today.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay, there being none, I will now close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for either more questions, comments, and making a decision. Supervisor Rivas.
I'll make some brief comments. I want to thank all the local residents that have participated in this process. You know, it's been an extremely educational experience. You know, I was Supervisor Munzer and myself, we were thrown into this in early 2011, and so to say it was educational it was at least that. But I can tell you that, you know, I'm not pleased with this document. I think that this is a document that has problems. I don't agree with a lot of the policies that are in the document. And as Supervisor Munzer asked himself, can he live with it? I don't know if I can live with it. But that's the challenge and the exciting part of moving forward. You know, I'm very excited to turn the page on this whole process. You know, and the main thing, when I read this, and I've read it, you know, on several occasions throughout the years, or since 2011, you know, and the third paragraph in the introduction says that San Mateo County, the 2035, the general plan sets a clear direction for the future of this county. And when I got done with this document, I had no idea what direction this county was going to move in. Because I see a document primarily that encourages two things, infill development and sprawl. And so that's the exciting part, is as a board, I look forward to working with my colleagues to improve this document through the amendment process, and really to work with them to improve our community and really reinvent our community. Because if this document says anything to me, it's our opportunity to reinvent ourselves. And although I may not agree with a lot of the policies, I certainly look to, you know, do my part to improve those policies and to work to improve our community. To work with, to work with associations like AMBAG, you know, so we can shore up these numbers. And we could all be on the same page, you know, in future updates, which I hope I won't be on this board for those future updates. But certainly I want to thank all the comments. I want to thank Marty for his contributions and the headaches that our boards put our residents in. You know, this process was drawn out. A lot of it was from our indecisiveness and policy changes and whatnot. And like I said, this was an educational experience for me. And I'm really happy. I want to thank Byron. Certainly Byron had to go through a lot of changes. He took over as our interim planning director, and in one of the most trying and challenging times for our department, you know, in recent memory. So Byron, thank you for your hard work and for your staff. Obviously, as the planning department has been hit hard with layoffs over the years, but they were able to get this work done. I want to thank our council and all of the consultants that participated. And Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Rivas. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I trying to figure out when we started this process. Actually, I was looking at, as a refresher, looking at the members of our GPAC committee that we assigned to, and I remember appointing 3 of my members from my district, and only one was still on that one. The other 2 dropped out, and it just shows the commitment that the public has to put in order to get a document that at least we can all work with. You know, I can't say that we all agree with it, but at least we can all work with it. And it's time investment that we provided, resources, and our staff. And Byron, thank you very much, because there were days and nights that I will call you and yell at you and chew you out, and I guess this is the product of that. And Michael, thank you, Michael, for you know, carrying the football for us. We do appreciate it, and we're about to get into the end zone, and that's the most important thing. And Supervisor Bertello, I remember the discussions and you and I had that it was going to be done as a chairman. Well, it didn't happen.
I'm chair now.
Supervisor Munzer, same thing. And Super Bertello and I talked about it, that I said it wouldn't be under our current chair, Madam Chair's position, so I owe you lunch. I owe you lunch.
I think we're even now.
You know what? We are even now. That is true. And just want to say, thank you to the public, and I hope it's a document that we can all work with together, and if there are going to be glitches with it. There are going to be issues that we're going to continue to discuss, but at least we don't have some of the other counties that have lawsuits involved. Cross my fingers. They might be coming, but at least today I can say we're about to finish a product. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to Supervisor De La Cruz. Supervisor Batella?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is, there's some areas that I don't quite agree with, but for the most part, this is a real good document that has plenty for everyone. One of the additions, the additional elements, I think is very key for the future of our county, the economic development, specifically of the public facilities, and there's a couple of new elements in this general plan that we didn't have in the past, and it's more reflective of what we need to focus on going into the future. There will be work for this board and future boards in the implementation of this general plan. That's just goes. It's a living document, as it said in some portion of it that I read. I want to thank Byron. This took a long time in coming because we're understaffed and people have, the rest of their functions of their departments to work on. And you did a great job, Byron. You've seen folks come and go in your department. And I know this board was real tough on you and our consultants and staff overall. And you guys did put it, brought it home. So I'm very pleased about that. And we'll go ahead and work on some of the areas that we need to work on as time goes on. And I see a bright future for San Diego County.
Thank you. Supervisor Batella. Supervisor Munzer?
I made my comments, and I'll just say once again, I want to thank all the staff that was part of this process, all the public that was part of this process. I was actually looking over that list, Supervisor De La Cruz, and there's some of those people that are literally not with us. They have passed away that were part of this process, and that was kind of shocking. And so I am glad we're here today. I commend you, Madam Chair, for getting it done.
I didn't do it alone. I'll never take
and
credit for
I'm
it.
looking forward to our motions in just a few minutes here.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Munzer. Again, I want to thank everybody that played a part. You know who you are. You know who stayed up at night trying to figure it out and trying to get work done. And I know that there was an enormous amount of time, hours, and heartaches to get to where we are today. So thank you again, as our other supervisors put it, thanking the public, because this was not a single person accomplishment. I just want to read a little bit about what's on the elements, and it really pretty much narrows it down to what this plan is all about. The fundamental purpose of the 2035 General Plan is to balance growth and development with the preservation of agricultural and open space lands, as well as biological, scenic, aesthetic, and other natural resources. That is what it's all about. That's what we want to accomplish. So I think it's all about balance. We're going to get there, and with a lot of hard work, it has been done. So thank you all for your commitment to getting this where it is today. So now I will ask for a motion. And Council, do I need to take these individually, or may we take them all at once?
I think you should probably take them individually.
Okay. Then let me go back to the AIT. Okay, well then we will go with the first one. I will entertain a motion for, we have conducted our public hearing to adopt number 2, which is the resolution number 2015-58. There's a motion
I'll second that.
and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 3, adopt resolution number 2015-59, and that is for the errata and the general plan.
I'll make the motion to adopt the 2035 general plan with the general plan errata